We are
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm so excited to have Sarah McVanel here today.
Oh, Shelley, I'm so excited for this too. Yes.
We're talking about the flip side of failing. Yay, yay, because I am all about failing, right?
We all fail sometimes, so why not be about something that just happens?
That's right. That's right. I, for one, have always said there is no success without failure. Without risk, you are just going through the motions, baby.
Yeah. You're in the comfort zone, that really cozy comfort zone that really nobody writes home about.
Really, honestly, I remember one time I was in a workout and everybody was like, oh my God, this workout's so hard. This workout's so hard. I said, you know what? Nobody ever hashtagged and said, oh, what an easy workout I just had. Right? I mean, it's, you're posting about your awesome, unbelievable workout that you may had to modify quite a bit in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, we do lots of challenging things that we think are natural, like having children. Well, I mean, the whole having kids thing is a little bit tough, but also adjusting to that, like even things that we want in life that we choose, when we go to school, if you start a business, you're rocking it in an amazing business and you're working really hard building Dovico, right? So the things that are most valued in our life are generally the things we have to work hard for. And along the way, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be some things that don't work well. It's inevitable.
Always. If you met anybody and in your life and they were like, I just don't know. I really don't know. So I'll tell you, that is one of my big interview questions. So if you're coming into Dovico for an interview, you're going to ask me what your failures are. You will not get the job if you do the, do you know what? Like thinking back, I've been very successful. I really haven't had any failures.
Yeah.
You probably won't get the job.
Well, it probably tells you that either the person lacks some insight, I'm guessing, or that they really don't have the resiliency, the ability to bounce back, the failure resiliency muscles that we all need to have, because the last thing we want is for you to bring it to somebody who seems like they are so amazing, but then judge other members of the team when they want to take a calculated risk, when they want to move into another area and serve a new customer from this super mission heart-based place that you have at Dovico. You don't want somebody to be holding back the entire team in case it doesn't work. So I think you're really wise to ask that question.
Absolutely. And you brought it up in your book, and I just love this piece. It was authenticity or appearance.
Yes.
Right? Absolutely. Are you going to be authentic? So I believe that if you can't answer the question of your failures, you are not authentic.
Yes. Yeah.
You are here for appearance only. You're looking good.
We're more relatable too. This is one of the things I'm hearing so often from audiences as a speaker is that they're craving that authenticity. They're craving real conversation. They're craving real, tell me about your life. Like you just did a live this morning talking about the fact that you have had failures. How many people do that as a live? First thing in the morning, it takes people with confidence. It takes people who have lived life, who have worked hard in their career, and people respect you more. I'm confident, Shelley, because you're willing to share that and to talk about that, as opposed to putting up just perfect pictures of you post-workout and, this is my amazing, life, and here's my amazing family. And sure, those things can be amazing. And we also have to acknowledge that there's sometimes tough stuff that has, what you said in your live this morning that I so resonated with was that you appreciate the things that you have and the successes you have all the more because of the stuff that you've had to go through in your life, in your career. Totally agree with that.
Yeah, I measure that success upon my failures. I don't know if I would look at success the same without those failures. I think that a lot of us are made up of that. Well, we're all made up of negative bias, and we all worry about the things that that one thing that happened that's going to break our day or break our month or make our year terrible kind of thing, right? That one failure, that one little thing that didn't go right, that you are going to now continuously think about that. That is going to be your negative narrative, and it is going to throw you off balance forever. That was me. That was me. The one thing that went wrong was what I hid behind.
Yeah. It is a great way to be able to have excuses. And it's okay for a while. Like when difficult things happen, especially happen to us, there has to be a time where we're allowed to process our way through it and figure it out. So, no criticism for folks who are working through a difficult time. You don't have to ever be cool about losing somebody or a trauma being, that has happened in your life, or that you got failed from a job. It's not like, oh, it's okay. We accept failure now. We're good. Like, there is obviously that period where we have to work through it. And to excuse it as the reason why we can't accomplish things or be happy in our life or do things in our career for the end of our lives, I mean, that's a life where we don't get a chance to create meaning out of the mess that can happen just as a part of life. And that's a fun expression we have in the speaking world, is your mess is your message. Like, who wants to hear a speaker that just shares like, I'm awesome, and here's another example of how I'm awesome, and then I also do this awesome thing, and I'm basically the best? That would be the worst, I think.
I think so too. I've heard those speakers actually. And yeah, I tap out. Right? Yeah. It's you disengage, right? Yeah. So, Sarah, I read your book, and it really resonated with me. I absolutely love the fact that you touch on these things. The way that you start the message, the way that you tell us the story with your son was just so impactful to me. So many of us are dealing with our children in school. My daughter is now a school teacher, and the reason why she became a school teacher is because she hated school so much. Yeah. She went through so much in school. I was on suicide watch a couple of times. I even get emotional now. She's 23, teaching herself, but she's gone into this field because she doesn't want another child to go through what she went through. Yeah. Can you share with us a little bit about? Yeah.
Absolutely. And, and here's yet another layer of connection we have, Shelley, is that my husband also detested school, was always the new kid. He was super poor as a kid. There was some really awful stuff that was happening in his household. They were super poor, and he was so distracted from school. The teachers always thought that he was not motivated. He was not smart. He was just going through a lot of awful stuff at home. And now he's a teacher as well, and in fact, for the first 10 years of his career almost, he worked in the at-risk program because he wanted to believe in these kids the way a lot of other places in the world that they had been in and out of didn't believe in him. So huge heart to your daughter for creating, again, your message. She created a beautiful career where she is going to impact thousands and thousands of people's lives for the better as a result of that. So that means that what she went through is not for naught, and that you can see that. So I'm just so glad.
Yeah. Thank you.
For the story that I open with, I share in the book, and it was a tough decision, I have to admit, to put this in black and white. And it required me to talk with my family about how okay they were for me to share what I saw as my biggest failure in my life. And I've had lots of failures. I've been fired. I've had, tough stuff happen. Like, I've had a trauma happen in my life when I was a teenager. I've had lots of tough stuff. And I'm brave enough to share that in this live because, Shelley, you've been very open, especially at Level Up Impact and other conferences you've been speaking about. So, girl, you're giving me strength too, to be open about that. So yeah, lots of things that have been really tough, but really the thing that I define as a success in life is raising amazing kids who feel confident, who do great things in the world. And when I let my son down by not noticing that bullying had started to happen again, and then it was ripping apart his mental health. He was on antidepressants, anti-anxieties, He had developed tics, even though he was not diagnosed with Tourette's. He was already battling with learning disabilities, but also learning exceptionalities, just not the kind that at that point in his schooling career were, had any use in the school system, or at least weren't leveraged at this point. And he was only in grade 4. And we found out that it was because he was being bullied, so severely bullied that he came home one day and he started cutting. And for those of you, I don't know how well folks who are watching this know about cutting, but cutting is not an attention-seeking behavior. It is how you process pain. You have to physically process the pain through your emotional pain through physical pain. And I know from a background, I did my master's in family therapy, spent my first couple of years of my career working in child protection. I knew we needed to get on this right away before it became a habit and a way of self-soothing or self-medicating, So what we did was I had to get really honest with myself that there were things that I had missed, that I was so distracted by this really big job that I had climbed the corporate ladder. I was proud of myself that I had climbed higher than I ever thought I would. And before the age of 40, and I had the title and the paycheck, and we had a house and we had a cottage and all the things that we think is a success. I had the two kids and the loving husband. And, in the end, if my kid is talking about wishing he wasn't alive anymore, none of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
And I became a recognition expert as the next iteration of my career when I gave notice and left my corporate job. Not that that's the solution for everybody, but that's what worked for our family. We sold everything to just get rid of all the things that were keeping us stuck and repressed and was getting me into this failure cycle. I was not failure resilient because we had zero financial and lifestyle flexibility. And so once we got out of that, then all of a sudden we had choice. And that can be really scary. Like for people who are watching this and they're thinking, wow, that seems even worse than processing and dealing with where you're at. Yeah, because you now have to totally own your life. You have to totally own your choices and run the risk emotionally of feeling like, but what if I fail? Because frankly, when we're in those times of failure, we don't trust ourselves. We don't feel like we will make any of the right decisions. And so sometimes you just have to suspend judgment and just try something different. And if it doesn't work, then try something else. So that's what we did is we sort of quit our life, so to speak, and we started again in a new community, closer to my family. We bought an old jalopy house so that we had no debt and we knew we could fix it up over time. And so we kind of had to get rid of that whole, glossy outside perspective. And we focused on our family, and we've just recognized the hell out of each other all the time. Every little thing, we tried to pay attention to the extraordinary that happened in the ordinary, celebrate and recognize those nuances of greatness, including in ourselves. My husband and I, who felt like we had let our kids down, we had to focus on the greatness and not miss my daughter in all of this. If she's 2 years younger than my son, it would have been easy just to focus on him and ignore her because he was the one suffering, but we didn't want her to sort of suffer in that process too. So, I started a business and because we didn't have debt, it could be, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't really matter because nothing would be as bad as our kid taking his own life or I think actually Drew Dudley gave us some better language about that. If he no longer were alive. So the good thing, and you've heard this story, but just in case other folks haven't read the book or haven't heard my story, within weeks of us moving, and granted, not easy, kids starting school at a very tight-knit community school, halfway through the school year, not the best time to switch kids, but they had friends within the first day. They had strong, my son had relationships that he had never had before in that school system. And he now a couple years later, this was 5 years ago that we made that transition. He's an award-winning rower. So he has the grit to get up at 4:30 in the morning and hit the water, even when there's ice floating in it. He's got arms like you, girl. I am jealous of your arms. Look at those arms, everyone. Hashtag need to do workouts in the morning. And he's off all of those medications except his ADHD meds so he can concentrate in school. He has the most loving relationship with a beautiful girl who's just a wonderful part of our lives now. He's got friends and he makes good choices about where he spends his time and who he spends his time with. Like instead of going to a party on Friday night he was invited to, he wanted to go cycling instead, mountain biking, and he has a job, so he has to be up for that. And so it's about it when we instead of feeling victim to our failures, even the ones that we create for ourselves. My husband, I felt like we had created these conditions by going along the path that pretty much all of us do. I shouldn't say all of us, many of us do, is we go on the corporate treadmill. And we just had to kind of make those shifts so that we role modeled for our kids, we're going to put you first. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't all still be happy and can't all be healthy. Because I'll tell you now, 5 years later, not only is my son well, but I couldn't imagine doing anything other than what I'm doing. I absolutely love being a professional speaker and a coach
And you're amazing at it. You're amazing at it. Honestly, the story blew my mind. The fact that you shared that, the fact that you put that in this book, so we could all understand where exactly it started, where exactly your motivation came from. And the fact that it was your son. I mean, can we all not relate? We can all relate to it, whether it's not in your family, but a friend that has a friend that is going through the same thing. So the fact that you were brave and you made sure that you fixed your family first. I mean, you are my BFF. I absolutely love you for that. I love you for absolutely sharing such a beautiful message and such an authentic message. And it gives so many people permission to say, you know what? I'm going to make the next step. I'm going to make a great choice so my children can actually be able to see what great choices are. I may fail. Yeah. But I'm going to recognize, right? I'm going to forever recognize others' greatness, while we're doing this. I absolutely love that message. My husband, I was sitting down last night and I was talking about your book, and my husband looked at me and he said, I frequently recognize others' greatness. And I said, well, I don't know if it's forever recognize others' greatness.
Yeah. You can have frequently, that's fine. That's
frequently is fine. Frequently is fine. I think you just wanted me to give you that little dig to say, maybe you should have that in there too. He thinks that was brilliant.
We'll co-author maybe a part 2 book.
Right?
Yeah.
We'd love that. So at 38, you had actually done it. You had actually, at 23, you had your master's. So you're like a smart. And you
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really, obviously you are. And then you were able to actually climb that corporate ladder at 38. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey? And I just kind of want to get on to the culture set. So you're in that cultural, you're in that workforce, you're climbing that corporate ladder. You're seeing what? What are you seeing as far as leadership goes in those?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Of all the podcasts and interviews that I've done with folks, nobody has ever asked me that. So snaps to you, girl. What are you doing with leadership? I was seeing such a variety of styles, and I could see, and maybe it's the psychology part of me, and also just an absolute curiosity about humans, that how it was so obvious to me certain styles of leadership were working well. We're building people's trust. People were giving discretionary effort. Folks were problem solving together, and that there was no mystery when in my organizational development capacity, when I get back the results of our engagement surveys, I could probably divide into piles based on the leaders. And because I always made a point of knowing every leader in the organization. And that was, in fact, the first thing that I did. The very first management job I did, I spent 6 weeks meeting with every single leader. I don't care what role you are. I'm going to eyeball you, eyeball to eyeball, and we're going to meet. And I'm going to ask you all about yourself, your team, what's working, what's not working. If you could wish for anything that our team would offer organizational development, what would it be? It was a value proposition exercise that I did, that the person that when I was leaving, exiting the last organization, when I was recruited into this role, she generously coached me, mentored me to figure out to do that, which I've been so lucky to have those mentors. And so in that process, I gained a lot of trust with people very quickly. I learned a lot about the things that from their perspective that were working and not. Some people were very aware of their leadership strengths as well as challenges and weaknesses. Others less aware. That's normal. And then I got a chance to see folks in action because they would invite me into their teams, come and sit in a team meeting, or I would like you to do this, some support with my team. And even if it were members who reported to me, we'd have our own in-team meetings about what we were seeing culturally under the surface, like what's bubbling up that we can expect to see that's going to be a major challenge to the business, like sick time or turnover or things. And then where were the best practices happening? So we would always keep that top of mind on the radar. And I would always partner with my HR counterpart, my peer, and we would sit down and we had a heat map. And I don't think anybody knew we did. We had a heat map of the culture of the organization based on what he was seeing in grievances and, occupational health and safety incidents and so forth. And I put my data and we would see, and then we started to realize risk management and other members could come together and look at this from a heat map standpoint. So we would then meet on a usually every 2-month basis as a operational services division. And then I can tell you, before I even got the engagement survey results, I would be able to put into piles. I never did this, but I could. The highest, mid, and lowest engagement scores based on, frankly, leader. And I wouldn't all be leader, however, the excuses around, but I have so many direct reports, or we don't ever have enough budget. Well, this department doesn't have enough budget either, and yet they have the most satisfied people. Or this particular area of the organization is going through massive change, as are you, and yet their people are joining in and helping with that change, and your team would not help you at all. So much of leadership is visibility, is asking people what's going on, is engaging them in solution finding together, is genuinely and authentically caring about what enables them to do their job best, and is super transparent and honest of what limitations they have as leaders to be able to make some of those things happen. So, I guess I don't know if I have I don't have any quick answers, frankly. I'm way too verbally verbose to,
Love that.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, how people interact with their leader, and you can just sit back and notice that. If you see enough folks interacting with their leader, it probably gives you a pretty good gauge as to the culture in that team. And it would be validated pretty easily with all of your organizational data. And I can say this pretty confidently from 20 years in various organizational development capacities. So does that answer your question?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think, like, after reading your book, I think having this failure resistant mindset or failure resilient mindset is absolutely huge, because we have, I believe, I may be patting my own back, but I believe we have a great culture at Dovico Software.
You should pat your own back anytime. And yes, you absolutely do have an amazing culture. Yeah,
we do. But, people are adverse to failure, even though Eve and I have said 100,000 times, take the risk. Take the risk. Eve actually put a program just in place just this last year, and it's called the Courage Program.
Oh, tell me.
And it's so for you to take your own personal risk. You have up to $3,000 that you can spend And you can, so for instance, if you are afraid of heights and you want to go on the Toronto CN Tower, the walk, and get over that, you can buy your plane ticket and have your hotel room and go around the tower and take the risk. Have some courage. So really, there's no, we put a cap on it. It's $3,000.
Pretty decent though. You could get a lot of courage momentum from
$3,000. So we had one of our girls just came back. One of our coworkers just came back, and she did the Camino Trail. She did 100 kilometers. She did the Camino Trail. And that was something that she desired to do. She wanted to do it herself, and to take that vacation money away from her husband, that was courageous in itself, Yeah. So she was like, ooh, he wanted to come and I want to do this on my own, and he's behind me. So this courage program was going to make me, help me do that. And I mean, she was posting for it with us every day. And it was just amazing, right? The Camino Trail. Another gentleman has written a sci-fi book, but he didn't have the means to get it published. So courageous, come and ask, and you can have the $3,000. Jeff, you met Jeff at Level Up. He is going to run that San Francisco marathon.
Love it.
So it's about, you may not be able to take the risk at work for some reason. You might have that mental block that you may fail, and it may cost the company money, but maybe, Eve's thought process, I believe, was maybe if you take a personal risk, so we've taken all of the financial burden away, and you've taken that personal risk, can you come back with that momentum?
I love it.
And throw that back into your work.
And what's so powerful about that is that you are watching people vicariously take risks. And even if it's not how you would define this is the risk that I would take, or I want what courage looks like for me is running a marathon or Camino Trail, it's that you can appreciate your colleague taking their own risk, and then you get a chance to see them come back evolved. And I don't want to use the word transform, because that can sometimes be an overused word, but they've evolved. You can't help but evolve who you are, and it impacts your mindset, as you say, and your ability to see yourself in this courageous light because you have done that. What I think is so incredible, and this just reinforces the evidence about why you've got a great culture there, is a lot of times, so many people ask me, like just yesterday, I was delivering a keynote for alarm monitoring centers, and they have a very tough job. That is not an easy job at all. And so many of the questions that we had in the audience, this was my recognition keynote, was about how do we acknowledge people authentically? How do we keep recognition fresh? I wish that I had this conversation with you on Monday so I could say, well, here's a great example, because it not only does it reinforce courage and risk-taking as part of your cultural norm, and of course, wellness and supporting people as humans first, which is also part of your culture, it's also a form of recognition. I value you so much. I'm willing to wait to get the best from you after you've had your courageous adventure on the Camino. And people come back not only with that, that sense of excitement and joy that happens when they do something that they've always wanted to do, that they fulfill a dream and a passion that's been on their bucket list, whether they really claimed it as such or not. They then want to demonstrate how they were worth the investment. And it's not always a conscious thought. For some folks, it's a very black and white. Okay, you gave this to me. I need to pay you back $3,000 worth of value. But for a lot of people, most of us, it's that you believed in me, I'm going to believe in this company. And it becomes intertwined. Your company investing in you being able to take that courageous step has now becomes part of your history. You would not perhaps have done that had it not been for your company encouraging you, giving you the time off, giving you the seed money to do it. And so cultures, organizations, whether you're small business or large business out there and you're watching this, when you invest in people to realize their greatest purpose and fulfillment, then you are interwoven into their story, who they are and their legacy. Yeah. This is not artificially capturing people's hearts and minds. This is truly authentically being woven into the story of their lives and their careers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel wholeheartedly with that. When Yves came back with it, it was after his, he went to see Baron Baptiste and did a level 1 yoga teacher training, and never thought that he would do it. He enjoyed yoga. That was kind of his release and whatnot. But that was the next level up. And he thought, my gosh, I had the courage to do it. And I feel like a badass now.
Yeah.
And it's given me such gumption. People have to do this. We have to take the barrier away from people so they can feel that badass awesome as well.
Yeah.
And when you're on fire like that, I mean, bottom line, like I we talked about Level Up. That was my very first time I was on stage speaking.
And you really did.
I thank you. But I felt badass for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. That had some longevity to it. And I was like, what's next, baby? Let's get it done. So having those things, having those, like you say, having the barriers taken away, being able to take that risk, being woven into the story, and just sharing in other people's triumphs, recognizing their greatness, but sharing in their triumphs is
tweetable.
Right.
Sharing in their triumphs. That's it. And believing that the triumphs are going to happen. That's the forever recognize others' greatness. It's just believing that the greatness is there. And our job as ethical employers is to nurture and relish in that greatness wherever it shows up. And one of the things that I really want to point out that you and even Dovico and so many of the leaders who showed up at Mark Black's Level Up Impact Conference is that when you create a failure resilient ecosystem, corporate culture's one, a conference where people can bravely share their story and their message and their intellectual property. It could be in your family environment. When you have an ecosystem where you are not conditionally valued and recognized, this is essential for people to be able to have a failure resilient mindset versus failure resistant. Because it's really important for folks who, are tuning into this and they're thinking, yeah, I want to lean into being more comfortable with trying things, even if it doesn't work out well, or we're going through a tough time right now. I'm going to take some risks because I know that it's the right thing to do. If you don't have people around you, if you don't have communities of support that see that value that, it's going to be harder. And it's not that tough stuff isn't worth pursuing. It's just sometimes we bump up against tough stuff that is unnecessary, and we need to clean up some of that stuff first. Again, not easy to do. However, I'll share with you one of the things that happened probably a year and a half after we moved here, and we've been vibing on this high frequency of moving our life along, and the kids are better and my business is taking off and my husband is happy because he's found his inner Mike Holmes fixing up our old jalopy of a house, and now this barn that I'm in, this 2-story barn that I now have the luxury of having. Thank you. Not everybody was cool with that. I had my closest girlfriend in the world that I will always have a part of my heart that is special for her. She couldn't handle it. I don't know what was going on. And I'm not going to speak negatively of her. It's just, there were so many examples of not niceness. And I just realized I'm not only totally inauthentic to my brand of forever recognize others' greatness when I'm letting somebody treat me as if I'm not great and not worthy. Also, though, I had to face the fact that maybe that was a conditional friendship, that I had seen it as a lifelong, we're going to grow old together and live down the street or always travel, because we used to travel together and all of this stuff. I realized that no, it was more conditional than I realized. It worked for a time. And if she's not okay with this next iteration of my life, and for whatever reason, I can't have that negative force in my life. So she's not in my ecosystem anymore. It was tough. And I occasionally worry that I'm going to be speaking at a conference where she's in the audience darting daggers at me. Or maybe she will feel love and she'll have come to her own healing or whatever. But that was one of the toughest things that I've had to do, is to break my closest female friendship, that I was confident that we were 100% in each other's corners, because I realized that she wasn't in my corner anymore, or maybe never fully had been. And that I had to trust myself enough to let that friendship go. And I don't mean give it a bit of space. I mean go, as it was a breakup, and it was a sudden breakup, and it had to be that way. And I'm sure people listening, Shelley, you're such a strong woman. I'm sure you've had to have that too. I just heard Elizabeth Gilbert speak on the weekend. She was freaking amazing. Eat, Pray, Love. Whew, I'm telling you, she was amazing. And one of the things that she shared that she wanted every woman in that audience to hear is, you don't have to become more feminine, like more forgiving, more healing, more caring, more like double down on that, to be able to be strong in your sense of self. In actual fact, maybe you have to self-care first. You have to take care of yourself. You need to lean into your own greatness and stand tall for yourself and say, no, you can't treat me that way anymore. And that is actually what she calls the divine feminine. Wow. And for men, the divine masculine is actually your ego being put aside and you being able to be giving and healing and nurturing and forgiving and inviting and supporting. So the divine feminine and the divine masculine are two different things. And it was so healing to hear her say that, because from time to time I beat myself up thinking somebody was about recognition and about flipping failure and about leaning into supporting family above all else. Am I not doing something wrong if I am not being all forgiving of all people? And she gave me the permission to not be okay with people who don't treat me and honor my greatness and who make me question my own greatness.
That's a really emotional point for me. So when I started to change, when I started to evolve, when I knew that I had a lot of healing to do, I knew that I could only be around people that brought me joy. Yeah. And not only, it's not just your friends, it's your friends' friends, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful. It goes fairly deep. And that was probably the hardest for me. I did not physically say goodbye to anybody. I just stopped participating. And my daily mantra became, I am a lion, not a sheep. I am a lion, not a sheep. I am a lion, not a sheep. And that's before I get out of bed. That's what I say to myself, because I realized if I went back to the herd, I would never be heard. Yeah. But that I still have so much emotional baggage around that, because honestly, and Mother, I love you so much, but my mother was part of that. Yeah. My mother did not fuel my joy. And I used to spend every morning with my mother. And I knew when I came into work, I was a bit uptight. And my mother loves me deeply, and I love my mother deeply, but I could not spend every morning with my mother because that would set the tone for the day. Yeah. So I call Mom after work. And that was tough. That was very, very tough. I have great friends that I used to spend a lot of time with, that I spend very little time with. I ensure, I don't know if I call it boundaries, but I ensure that I can be heard and that my message will be received and I will not be condemned for leading with love.
Yeah. 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 And people have to be worthy, because you are so generous with your love at work, in your, in your family unit, in your friendships, in these new connections. Like you and I have only known each other for not even a month. And it's like, as you say, BFFs, right?
I know.
So, yes. And people need to earn it. For you, you are so loving and you're so generous with that belief in people and investing in people and sharing with people. They just because you're generous doesn't mean to say that people don't have to earn it from you. And they're lucky to get it from you, Shelley, really.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Strong women like us really have to stick together, because you know what? In all of this, we're not strong all the time. We're not
Yeah.
strong every hour. We're not strong every day. So when I'm able to reach out to Sarah, or I'm able to reach out to Natalie, or I'm able to reach out to these friends that are Natalie Davison. Love you, Natalie.
Yeah.
and
Natalie. Oh my God. Another sister from another mister. Yeah.
right.
Yes.
I know she is. She's my sister. But I need that. I need people that are in my life that can say, you're all right, girl. You're all right. And remind us, and I loved this in your book, failure is the gateway to greatness. Failure is the gateway to greatness. And I mean, I said to Leonard, I was like, look at this. My husband, Leonard. I'm like talking like everybody knows us, Sarah.
You probably do. Yeah.
But honestly, I think it's just so important that people understand. And that is the biggest struggle here at Dovico that we have. A lot of perfectionists, and it can't go out until it's perfect. So I'll be late because it's not perfect. Right? When in actuality, you and I both know it's not because it's not perfect. You're scared to fail. You're afraid to fail. And that's what it is. I remember when I first got into helping the homeless, and they were always at me about not having rules on the wall. So every place they went, of course, there was always rules. The soup kitchen, there was rules on the wall. And in our particular establishment, we had no rules. We didn't really know what we were doing, actually. But we had no rules.
It's like we're figuring it out as we go along. Yeah.
We did. The one thing I knew is that we were going to treat everybody with love, dignity, and respect, period. So I went down to a local soup kitchen, and yes, they had a lot of rules on the wall, And as I was going back to our establishment, we were helping our homeless, those that are suffering homelessness now. I realized if I put rules up on the wall and I miss one of them, then they're not accountable. I realized right away it wasn't really about the rules on the wall. It was really about their accountability. And I decided not to put any rules on the wall. We were going to only govern with love, dignity, and respect. And if you needed to talk to me about those things, then let's talk about it. But these are people, these are marginalized people that live in our community that have already in their mind, they have a failure resistant mindset, but they've already failed. They're at their all-time low. How can I do anything but just love them, give them the utmost dignity, and teach them how to be okay with their failure and okay with their comeback.
Well, and the other part of that is okay with their choices, because for some people being homeless, that's not a failure. For some people, I choose to not live inside. I choose to live outside. And us casting our judgment about what people should do is kind of our problem. I mean,
absolutely.
So it's, I love how when you come from a place of love, if somebody says what I want for my life is to move into an apartment or to move into a transitional home or to in the winter and to not live outside or whatever that is, great. How can I help you? If somebody says, I want to get health, I want to get a decent meal every day because I need the freedom of being outside, how can I make sure that you're safe if that's what you choose to, how you choose to live? So, and we can't forget that for those of the folks who are watching who are Canadian, I'm sure you'll get this. I mean, we just finished a federal election. It wasn't, I mean, really in the span of history, it wasn't that long ago when women didn't have a vote.
That's right.
Men voted for us. It was, and even once we had the vote, it was a fair amount of time afterwards before we could have our own bank account and not have our husband co-sign. It was actually shout outs to credit unions. It was credit unions who were the first ones to start that for women. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that.
I don't know that. Yeah.
We love up our credit unions. So when we think about how we really, this whole concept of choice in Canada is still a fairly new concept. Our Indigenous people have had limited choices for for many people, their choices are extremely limited still. For our young people, we still make them do a careers course. And my husband actually teaches careers, so I'm not bashing teachers. And they are expected to do certain things. All the funny noises, by the way, are walnuts falling from the walnut tree on our metal roof. So I don't know if you can hear that.
I heard that.
Firing squad.
Wow.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, there falls here in southwestern Ontario. Yeah.
Wow.
And
that sounds like that could hurt you, though.
They're like this big,
right? Like walnut.
Yeah. Anyway, no, I'm not being fired at. So I think that we need to remember that choice is really personally defined, and that we can't cast our own opinions on people about what failure is and isn't. Part of being failure resilient and creating an ecosystem, a failure resilient ecosystem, is asking people, what do they want? What do they need? What would success look like for you? And hold the space that it could look the same or different next year or next week or tomorrow, and to not hopefully cast judgment on it. And that is, I think, one of the trickiest things we find, my husband and I right now, as parents of, fortunately right now, pretty healthy kids. When you had a child with mental health challenges, you're always on the watch. And I'm always very, very mindful about that. But we also have to assume health until we see evidence otherwise, and then act really quickly. So part of what we have to work really hard on is providing some, to your point around rules, some guidance so that it is people, they feel loved because we pay attention, and that there's some structure so that there's parameters in which to thrive. Like, it's non-negotiable. You cannot be out really late before a school night. And there is a curfew on weekend nights. I can't tell you how many of my kids' friends have no curfew. And I can't understand how a kid who's 14 or 16 has no curfew. I say to my son, please know the reason why you have to be home at 11 and why I will be the one to pick you up if you can't get a ride is because I love you. But when you're home, you have full reign pretty much on what you do and how you do it. And I trust you to pick the right friends and so forth. But I have to give you some parameters because I love you and because I want you to be safe and because I have lived a little bit more life than you. And then pretty much everything else is your choice. So when I was talking about the whole careers thing, is that oftentimes they don't have a lot of choice in the school system. They've got to take certain courses. They're being really channeled into picking a career, which we know people have 7 to 15 in their lifetime. Like, how can somebody who's 15 pick the rest of their life? But, again, if we teach with love, we say to kids, you know what, give it your best guess. If you're not sure, do a co-op. Take a few courses and see if you like it. If you're struggling in biology, but you really want to be an ultrasound technique, just keep working. Like, get a little extra help, put up your hand. It's not that you're not good at it. It's not that you're not going to make an amazing ultrasound tech. It's just, it may be tougher for you. And that was the thing for me. And I really hope people, if they've been watching from the beginning, which I hope they have, and they hear, you had beautifully said, Sarah, you're a really smart lady. You're high achieving. I worked really hard to get where I am. I worked every single day for about 3 hours to get through OIC math. It was not easy. And I came out with an 80, but the only reason was because of sweat equity. I probably would have flunked it if I didn't grind away, hard work at it. My husband, the only way he got through first year university was he hired tutors. And now he's a teacher. He teaches some of those subjects because he had worked so hard at it, and he wants to make it easier. He wants to teach people in a way that's more accessible. So, you can achieve great things and people only see the end result. But actually, the story, if we ask people and we're curious about the journey to get there, it's probably riddled with failures and disappointments and struggles and challenges. And that's where we can relate to each other. And not put people up on a pedestal, but be able to relate to them, and really embrace choice.
Yeah. Honestly, it is. I have changed my attitude towards failure after reading this book, and I thought I had a great attitude.
You have a great attitude.
Towards failure. I really did. But, the flip side of failing has really, really changed my mindset and really has given me so many tools to help people here at Dovico to get rid of their failure resistant mindset. Because if you have that resilience, my gosh, the world is your oyster, is it not? Like, I mean, honestly, I think so many things open up for you if you are in the proper mindset, if your attitude changes towards failure. So I want to thank you so much. Do you have any closing words?
Well, I guess I just say to all those wonderful Dovico folks who have such passion for the work that you're doing and the clients that you're serving, if you're hesitant to let something go until it's perfect, know that the world needs your genius, that your product makes people's lives better and easier. So if it could be 97% there and you can keep working on that 3%, please know you're not disappointing them by you working on the 3%. In fact, frankly, your customers will give you great feedback around things that if you didn't release it, you wouldn't know could also be improved and make the customer experience even better and more useful and so forth. So I guess I just want to hold the faith that progress is better than perfect. And the fact that you want it to be so good is so wonderful. And that's why your company has grown so successfully as well, is you produce great products, really great products. And nobody can benefit from them if they don't have access to them. So just, lean into that sense of that culture that you have where hearing about the things that aren't working as well, or hearing about the things that are the glitches, the bugs, or so forth, that's inevitable. Progress is better than perfect. And you are still serving the world if it is almost perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, Sarah McVanel, I love you. I love you. And I have a funny feeling we'll be doing more of these.
We will be doing more of these.
Wow. Love you. Get your workout in.
Thanks for tuning in.